bring Bob Kolaski in on this. Now, Bob's a founding director for CISA's National Risk Management Center. He's currently working for the company Exiger, and it's great to have you on the program, Bob, as you have a lot of experience with these critical infrastructure issues. Again, we don't know for sure yet what's going on or what went on here earlier today. I said earlier in the show, it does seem to raise some questions, though, about whether or not the country's ready if this was some sort of a cyber attack. And we don't know here, but what about the questions about whether somebody was coming after us? Are we ready?
Yeah, sure. I appreciate Evan's reporting there that at this point there's nothing that we've seen that would indicate that this is a cyber attack. And I would have been one of those government officials looking at that question. And it's important that that gets investigated. It's important that the FBI and CISA and the Federal Communications Commission have access to what AT&T is learning about, so that we can confirm with certainty that it was not a cyber attack. Outages like this, the ability for a cyber attack to cause outages like this, if an adversary tries to do something like that, we still think that that's a plausible thing that could happen. And so having the testing what would happen with outages and how resilient the system is to phone service being down gives us a way to test how resilient we could be if there's a cyber attack that would have this level of consequences. Again, there's no reason at this point to think there is. The good news is the service is back up and running, and there's probably have not been significant cascading impacts on other critical infrastructure from AT&T being down. That's always something that I used to worry about is, one thing happens and that causes cascading impacts, causes systemic effect, and all of a sudden, communities are in real bad shape. In this case, it doesn't seem to have happened.
I was thinking about it earlier. It's just we're so reliant on our cell phones. We have been for years, but now even older people don't have, in many cases, landlines anymore. Hardly anybody does. I mean, some people do, but I don't know very many people have a landline phone in their house, right? So the USA Today headline I'll put up that the phone companies want to eliminate traditional landlines. What's at stake and who loses? And when I say I was thinking about it earlier today, I was wondering, for emergency services, 911 and all that, is the system that we have now that is reliant on cellular networks strong enough? Is it as strong as it was in the old days when everybody had a landline?
So on emergency services, the good news is we've invested since 9/11 in something that the Department of Commerce stood up, the FirstNet services, which AT&T actually operates, which emergency services have access to. So they're not reliant on only traditional cell networks. And from FirstNet's reporting today, their services were able to withstand outages. So there have been investments made in redundant 911 capabilities, E911 capabilities. I don't think for emergency services going back to landlines is the answer.
Right.
I am a fan of consumer choice, so I hope the companies enable consumers who want to have access to landlines to continue to have access to landlines for their own preference and their own personal preparedness, because they may not have access to emergency service backup capability. But I don't think as a nation we need to have, terrestrial landline backups when we've made such an investment in E911 and 911, and in FirstNet.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. I just wanted to ask about that. We had a congressman on, Democrat from Maryland, Congressman Ivey, and we talked a little bit about this last hour. I want to play part of what he said, and then we can talk about that. Here's the congressman.
What we need to do is do an assessment and make sure we understand all of the threats that are potentially out there. And remember that the threats are evolving radically and quickly, especially to the extent they're starting to integrate AI capabilities. We've got to make sure that we're changing and protecting ourselves and moving as quickly as those threats are.
Are we, Bob? I mean, that's the question. Again, we don't think or we don't know that there was any kind of a attack in this case, but are we ahead of the game? I think I asked you this last time we were around. It brings up the question here specifically with communications infrastructure with so many threats out there.
Yeah, before we get to AI with communications infrastructure, let's think about things. And there was some reporting about potential impacts of geomagnetic disturbances, space weather. That's something that could impact communication systems. So building resilience to space weather, natural disasters. France a couple years ago had outages because of somebody cut fiber optic cables. So those threats need to be part of an all-threat planning scenario, and then take those into account, and then worry about ways to toughen network defenses. It all ends with the story, however, of a service not being available and having to plan for operating with a degraded service. So it isn't, let's not get locked into what the cause of something, of a communication system not working, but let's plan for failure and build resilience against the failure and continue to build redundancy into that. And that's what I would like to see a lot of the focus coming out of this. Let's learn the lessons from this and build and encourage more investments in resilience. systems seem to be resilient this time, but maybe won't be next time.
Okay, all makes sense to me, Bob. Thank you. A lot of expertise in government for years. Bob Kolaski is now at the company Exiger. Thanks for coming on again. We appreciate that.